Okay, so I was just watching a quick clip of the movie, an old movie called Wishmaster, and there was a scene in the movie where uh, I guess someone had made some wishes to bring some stone, like these Mongolian fighters from like China. Uh, it's in a museum, and it's like a stone carving or something like that, but it looks like it looks real, and so it came to life. Um, and I was thinking a little bit more into that from the perspective of our past human history, aside from the science. So basically, how in society there were a lot of superstitions that people held. And I think that, for example, in those with those stone figures or those lifelike stone carvings, I think they were specifically made to deter people. Like if you have 1,000 stone carvings all grouped together one area, and they all look like they're armed, they're ready to fight, they look lifelike, but they're stone. But in the time, people used to think that, um, you people could be turned to stone and unstoned, I guess. And I think there's a lot of validity to that perception, from the sense of maybe uh, discoveries that were not really scientifically understood yet. So more specifically, I'm talking about dinosaur bones and like petrified wood and stuff like that. And like, people, I think in those times, people didn't have the knowledge to understand that, from a geological sense, they didn't have that knowledge of how you could have these bones that are, apparently made of rock or stone. It looks like it was from a living figure. And how is that possible? A living thing. And how is it possible that something living could be made out of stone? And so, I think that there's a lot of maybe assumptions that people had in those times, but I think mostly from the scope of human society, I think it tends to be in general governed by a lot of beliefs that are not really foundational beliefs. They're just kind of based on assumptions, and fear. Maybe also another component is fear. But also too, I believe that religion and spirituality, specifically religion, though, religious text more specifically, kind of played a role in having people think in that way, in terms of believing things that otherwise they might not believe if religion hadn't entertained certain ideas with large masses of people. And so I think that it's that kind of mindset that kind of plays into this kind of sense of global governance that maybe leaders of the past used to kind of psychologically control people. So, like for China, they would have like a whole Mongolian army made out of stone, and that might deter some people, especially like imagine like knights that are on a quest to vanquish evil, and they see this humongous uh, this like stadium filled with people that look like they're turned into stone, that could possibly be unstoned or turned back into real life. Who knows? And so people believed back then. People tended to believe in things that were kind of maybe from our modern standards, probably on the scope of like delusion, and in the sense of like delusion and maybe borderline delusion. It's kind of like the gateway into like more delusional things. But I'm saying that that kind of society, in the general sense of it, kind of promoted that way of thinking. And maybe it's part of how, like we develop instinct over generations and generations of cycles of a life form's existence, there are certain instinctual adaptations that are inherently like part of the DNA of that organism. So like from the perspective that like we are human and I'm an individual, I have my own individual feelings and my own ways of thinking. What if that's not entirely true? What if a big portion of that is kind of genetically predetermined, from that scope of like kind of almost like learned behaviors. So I mean, realistically, organisms wouldn't be able to survive without that sense of instinct, and like maybe more normalizing the word instinct with the perception that it is part of the thought process. And so like what causes a shark to thrash around and turn around and rip the pieces of food apart? How does it know to do that? Is it just, does it learn it? Do the sharks that are not able to learn that, are they able to survive? I think I don't think that's, I think it's instinct. It's part of their instinct. It's something that is a passed down emotional construct of the psychology of that life form, of that living being. So like in our human evolution, I think that we have a history riddled with thinking in ways that are unfounded, and it's part of our psychological makeup even to this current day, where we have all these scientific, we're living in a highly advanced society. And so it kind of brings a sense to maybe a lot of nonsense that has been going on in recent times. I mean, sure, to a certain degree, people, maybe, choosing not to vaccinate might not be such, an extreme measure to take, but it might so be that if you were like 70 years old, or maybe if you had a high risk factor, and your risk of death or severe, maybe not even death, maybe thinking in terms of severe disability as a result of the infection, maybe not even people being able to think from that scope, maybe just we think in extremes. So like, oh, that's not going to affect me, I'm going to survive that. But you'll survive, but what will happen in the meantime? All sorts of disabling things could potentially happen. So I'm saying that even people that should be making a rational decision don't really know how to make that rational I mean, I guess like kind of maybe walk through the points of rationality to they reach to the conclusion where it's a really solid foundational sense of a good decision, rather than something that's based on maybe assumptions, or not, just maybe taking someone's word for it. Maybe that's also part of our human psychological evolution, is that we kind of tend to do that on a massive level. And maybe that's the reason why bad people tend to have positions of great power. And maybe there's something deeper to this. So I was watching this movie, Wishmaster. It's an older movie. It's something I relate with my age group, and so this demon comes to life, and I guess in the process of it existing, it's having these people make these wishes, and all these people are wishing for various different things, and he doesn't really give them the wish exact. I mean, he gives them the wish, but it's like it's a little bit twisted. It includes a lot of pain, and so but I guess there were some stone carvings in a museum that had been brought to life, and I just I was watching that as a movie, and they have a certain sense of there's the movie's scary. It's a scary movie, so those are scary characters that are part of the movie, and so that's kind of part of my like my thought process going into relating it to people might have I wonder if there's a sense of maybe people were scared of that stuff in the past, like the reality, the alternative sense to this movie is that people probably viewed some of these scenes in the movie kind of as part of actual reality. And so I don't know how to talk about this kind of like a mind blowing kind of experience or thought stuff. And so like before scientists discovered dinosaurs existed 65 million years, and geology and all these advancements in knowledge and science kind of all combining together, we have the ability to use radiocarbon to see how old something is, and it's pretty accurate, carbon or isotopes or something like that. And so we have all these technologies coming together, and the end result is that we understand that dinosaur, these bones that maybe have been in possession of maybe some pretty rich people in the past, leadership, people in leader roles, people that control the environment, maybe they had these possession of these bones that are made out of stone. And so and also too, like like petrified wood, like this is a tree, it's a huge stump, and it's stone. How is this possible? And so like that starts the process of our fantastic imagination that I think we I don't know if we have that as kids naturally, or if it's something more so that we just tend to be kind of socialized into. I think it's the social aspect of it kind of is the guiding force in terms of what we think, how we think, and our behaviors and stuff like that. It's not really the individual. But on the other side of the perspective is that kind of like the psychology, the instinct slash psychological, how we think, how that's that's part of our genetic makeup. So I don't know. So yeah, I just find that interesting how something like from a movie that is just purely like a horror fictional movie, it's not reality at all, has potential reality in it. I just find that kind of very intriguing that I could kind of pull that out of something that's not even, it's just a fantasy movie, and that part of it is like rooted. There's probably a strong roots in reality. I mean, the Chinese emperors, they probably had all those statues made for the purpose of like warding off, maybe it could be on a small level, like, keeping some sense of safety. It might not have an effect on like a massive level, but more so like on a smaller level where you have individuals that are setting sail and going to different parts of the world, and maybe they have the they're in that sense of like a crusade kind of mindset. I don't know. And so that's kind of and I think that kind of practice of warding off people with that kind of psychology was practiced in all over the world throughout history. And I think that sense, and maybe how like religion is also kind of the catalyst to that kind of psychological kind of deterrent, or like almost self-defense in a sense, or protection, self-protection. That religion is the catalyst for having that kind of psychology work. Otherwise, maybe if people didn't know anything about the Bible or supernatural things, they probably wouldn't think in that scope of what the reality is. They would think in scope of maybe more so in terms of the individual observational sense of reality, how you experience it on an individual level rather than this mass construct of reality, the matrix part of reality. So yeah, like some other examples that come to mind are those huge heads, like the huge carving heads on Easter Island, on the Easter Islands. There's an old video game that I used to play where like they were an opponent that you had to get through as part of the game. So yeah, these humongous head things, and actually the way that they were designed was that they wobbled, so they could be placed at the top of the hill, and if there were like sailors coming nearby, the statue, this carving was already ready, set in place. They had carved it out of the stone. It was set in place, ready for them to release it. And then when they finally released it, it would have like this wobbling kind of walking effect down the hill. And so, just imagine what that might look like to sailors that are maybe 30 miles away. They see these giants, these rock giants in the distance. It appears they stay away from those islands real fast. And so that's kind of the mentality of history. So dinosaur bones, maybe it's more than just dinosaur bones. It's like we have fossilized shells and all sorts of artifacts from in archaeology. And so, just imagine how the ruling class, they probably, had some kind of expositions, or some kind of maybe personal, collection of these examples. And maybe that's all it took to kind of, be that catalyst of infusing fear into, and they believe it too, maybe. And so, it's kind of, I think it's, I don't know what to say. Yeah, that's another part, is that, they probably believe it too. Maybe they don't know what to believe. Maybe they know that it works really good to control people, and they exploit the hell out of that. And I think that's what they commonly did, like the emperor of China, or the emperors of China, who knows how long it took them to carve out all those, stone, realistic looking stone fighting Mongolian warriors. And so, what else? I don't know what else. So yeah, before dinosaurs, people believed that those were bones of dragons, maybe, and or mythological creatures. There was a lot of fear that people potentially existed back in those days. A lot of fear, and maybe that played a role in kind of the sense of people not really exploring the world too much, or this kind of this hesitation in on like a massive social level to kind of go out beyond the world around you, to explore beyond. But maybe that was really scary for people. So yeah, I think science for sure played a role in the advancement and changes in society, and the discovery of this lost land that we have, that we call America, that they probably in mythology referred to as Atlantis, or the lost land, or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, I really like this kind of this take on history. I like kind of I like this way of thinking about history. It's very like a kind of a refreshing take on history and like psychology. And so I don't know, in terms of psychology in our modern times, from the scope of health, things that affect our human health overall, things that are of a psychological nature tend to be are the leading cause of health related issue over anything else. It's the psychological issue, the psychological thing, the thing that you potentially need to go to the doctor for and seek professional help. The statistic actually specifically shows that about 70% of people in the population at some point in their life will go seek professional psychiatric help. And so I think there's a lot of misperception when it comes to big pharma, like being like an evil, this bad guy figure that has too much power, and maybe sure they're over prescribing stuff. Maybe it's not so much out of a sense of greed. Maybe it's more out of a sense of maybe like social complacency, where, and it's also a little bit more complicated than that, where like if you set goals that are too much for the majority of people, and those goals disencourage the majority of people because there's too much, people tend to not kind of go in the direction towards the goal. And so for the sake of encouraging some kind of movement, doctors and medicine in general tends to kind of turn down that dial of expectations way down to what is socially, expected to have a good result, where people will take that first step. So, I think people oftentimes misperceive that as, the government is nonsense, or these stupid rules, these stupid, COVID mandates, they don't make any sense. I think, people don't realize that the scope of medicine is actually quite complex. And things that don't make sense actually do kind of make sense from that scope of it. And so yeah, psychological is the leading problem, uh, health related problem, period. And more money in psychological health than anything else combined, than anything else. It's the psychiatric medication, big pharma. And so yeah, I'm not exactly sure about that statistic because medicine in general is pretty big. People have a whole bunch of conditions, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, common stuff, and it might not end result might not be that someone has like heart disease, but it might be that they have diabetes. But it's all kind of interconnected. It all plays a role, leading in kind of the same end result, or a similar end result. It's all connected. So yeah, psychological, big pharma. I don't really have, or more so, I've grown to have less of a gripe towards big pharma, because I mean, I myself, I was diagnosed with a psychiatric condition about 15 years ago, and that was pretty difficult for me. I have a lot of thoughts on maybe conflicting point of views, or apparently, but they're just thoughts, and I have different perceptions of it, and so yeah. But in general, during some of the hard times, it could get really bad. It could get really bad, and I chose to opt out of the medication-based treatment a long time ago, and I was successful when I had support from my family. When I tried to do it on my own without any support, that was so hard for me, and a common end result from that would be that I was rehospitalized. And it was just when I had finally had the support that that was what helped me be successful. I think that played a huge role. That played a humongous role in the end result that I have now. I still experience a lot of the same exact stuff, but it's different now. I don't have this overwhelming pressure from this other source, from being forced to do something that I don't want to do, which is take medication, because like I said, I have my perceptions, my perspectives, and beliefs on my experience, and it's not all bad. It's a mixture of different things. And so sure, sometimes when it's really bad, the only thing I could think about is having some kind of solution to this thing. And medication, I took that for a long time, but that didn't really do anything. But also, in addition to that, I didn't want to take medication. So there's a sense when it comes to patient doctor communication where if a patient isn't 100% on board with the treatment, even though you might want to be, but like emotionally, on the emotional level, if you're emotionally not in alignment with that way, I think it makes it way harder to have an easy kind of back and forth conversation where you have optimized results because of that ideal state of communication. Personally, some of the things that I've done for myself is to just give myself the space to experience my experience. And, that could escalate things, but in addition, it also leads to a sense of resilience. And the next time I experience something, it's not so bad. It's like I'm familiar with this, and I know what it's about. And so it's I don't know. There's a lot about it that I can't really put to words, and beyond just oversimplifying it like kind of I'm doing now. But yeah, I chose to opt out, and I have a lot of support from alternative perspectives that I have access to because of the internet. And I see examples of patients that have my condition from like the 1950s, and my perception, my overall perception of the ingredients of the environment that I see is like that person. I don't see that person as having the majority of their issues coming from having this psychological problem. I see it mostly is like there's these other societal issues that exist at the time, where maybe if you're more, maybe, like, I think a good this definition of it might be a heavily closeted gay, So like you experience gay feelings, but you're so cut off from that on a personal level that you don't even think about it too much. You don't really accept it too much, and so there's this kind of this barrier where on the deep down inside, sure you have those feelings, but that's kind of way in the back there. And there's a lot of good reasons for it socially, especially in the 1950s. There's a lot of good reasons for it. So if like your physical, the way that you hold yourself, the way that you move, if that portrays a sense of, you know, homosexuality, and choose to use that word for more of like a technical sense rather than, but you know, like from the scope of medicine, you know, it is kind of fused with a lot of injustices of the past, so it's kind of hard to focus it from a technical sense. But yeah, I forgot what I was saying already, but I'm just trying to say that, you know, if you're experiencing social disapproval on a massive level, and you can't even communicate it, and you know, it's not so much you that's the problem, it's the environment. It's like a traumatic environment. And so like the first step of medicine is of like taking a better direction in your psychological health, is that if you can, you know, maybe changing your environment, even if it's a temporary a short-term change, just like for a few hours, changing your environment, changing your frame of thought, changing your mindset, you know, that has a benefit. You know, going back to that environment where you feel bad, maybe you're being bullied at school, you know, that immediately is a situational hardship. And so just being able to take a break from situational hardships are a small step forward towards having some kind of change. And whether it's good or worse, who knows what it might be, because there's a lot of, I think it's a very complex situation. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is beyond the scope of how much time I want to spend on this video. I just really wanted to share these ideas on kind of superstitious and nonsensical, and what reality was, and perceptions of reality and stuff like that. Stuff that I think people generally, or at least I don't really hear that conversation too much. I don't really hear it too much around. So yeah, it's very intriguing to kind of look back and have a perception of the world from that scope of it. I think that's really cool. So yeah, that concludes my video.